delighted to introduce Meryl Ann Butler, who so dynamically expresses the divine feminine in her life. Meryl Ann is a gifted artist in more media than most of us could even name. She has taught thousands of students of all ages for over 35 years. She's an expert in fiber art, quilting, wearable art, costumes, and on curricula for art and healing and art and planetary healing. Artist, teacher, labyrinth builder, mother, grandmother. Her inspiring visionary art reveals her understanding of the divine feminine, the mandala, the promotion of world peace. She is also managing editor of Op-Ed News. Her irrepressible and enthusiastic personality contains very large light and spirit, a goddess indeed. Let's give Meryl Ann a big fellowship welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, wow, this is so exciting. Thank you for that great introduction. There's one little piece missing, and that is that I'm reopening my art school in Ocean View in Norfolk, and it's really exciting. And there will be a grand opening at one point, and there is a 6-foot hand-carved statue of the goddess Saraswati, the goddess of the arts, in the foyer. It's a museum piece. It's worth about $4,000. I got it at a garage sale in Arizona, which is so red and Christian that they thought she was the devil, and I got her for $100. And then I didn't have a place for her for 10 years, so she lived with my girlfriend. And then I drove to Arizona to pick her up, and she fit in the back of my car with a ½ inch to spare, and it was the return of the goddess. So I'd like to ask you if any of you have noticed lately anything like wars, electoral fraud, Wall Street irregularities. These are all symbols of out-of-control patriarchy. And that doesn't mean men. That means male energy. So if we want to change that, a good way to change it is in our own lives. And one of the things we did today, which was translating some male pronouns into female pronouns for the Great Invocation, is a way that every one of us can do that every day. Our language, our words are our prayers. In Genesis, when God or Goddess spoke, that's what made things happen. So that's what we can do, too, with making things happen. So the Sue Monk Kid reading that... who read that one? Did you read that one? Yeah, Shelley read that one. Where she says the exclusive male imagery of the divine that creates imbalance. But guess what? It's not only imbalance for women. It's imbalance for men. And I have a whole other talk on how the patriarchy is more damaging to men than it is to women. And I believe that. So what we're talking about is a balance inside ourselves. And since patriarchy has been around for 5,000 years, it's probably going to take more than one Divine Feminine Sunday a year to balance that out. So I invite you to think about ways that, think globally, act locally. Locally in your own life, in your own heart. about bringing the divine feminine back in. And it's useful to know what things are of the divine feminine so that you can bring more of that in. So I have a list, which any one of you can get from me by emailing me if you like. So just to get clear about, we're not talking about gender, okay? We're talking about the yin and the yang, the feminine and masculine. So the feminine is the heart and the emotions, and the masculine is the head and the thoughts. And by the way, this is not a value judgment. There is no value judgment here. Both are equally important. We feel in this moment in time, many times, that the feminine feels like it's more important to bring in. And that's because if we want balance, it is. So if we want to have, and we don't want static balance, we want like a seesaw back and forth, but not like this. That one doesn't work. So the feminine is the arts and the masculine is the sciences. The feminine, this is an interesting one. The masculine is about facts. The feminine is about the greater truth of myth. Cervantes in Man of La Mancha said, facts are the enemy of truth. So think on that one for a while. And the other one, there's a Native American shaman, and I can't remember if it was Sun Bear, but I used to hear this story up at the ARE a lot. And this Native American wise man or shaman told a story to a group of people. And someone raised their hand and said, "Is that true?" And he thought about it for a moment, and he said, "Yes, it's true, but I'm not sure if it really happened." So that's where we've gotten with that. We also, the feminine is grace, the masculine is law. Jesus said he came to save us from the law and to bring grace. Jesus is one of the most feminine avatars of all time. And he was the one who came in with inviting, we don't have to live under the law of Hammurabi, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The feminine is community. The masculine is hierarchy. The feminine is a horizontal path of power, empowering others. The masculine is a vertical path of power, power over others. The feminine is nature, the masculine is technology, the feminine is compromise, masculine is competition, the feminine is a win-win paradigm, the masculine is a win-lose paradigm. The feminine are dreams, getting information and knowledge from dreams and non-ordinary reality, and the masculine is about getting information and knowledge from a wakefulness and ordinary reality. So the truth of that is you need all of it. If we were in a hugely matrifocal society, which you can't say matriarchal because that's like the opposite. Archal is hierarchy, and that's not what the feminine is. But if we had a totally matrifocal society that was out of balance as much into the feminine as we are now into the masculine, nothing would really get done. Everybody would probably just sit around being stoned. Because you have to have some competition, some drive, some energy to move the pendulum back and forth. So it's not that the feminine is better. It's that if we have 99% masculine and 1% feminine, which I don't think is far off in our society, you're not going to have that movement. And basically, movement is the essence of the universe. It's vibration. That's all the universe is vibration. So it's movement. So if we're not participating in that movement, we're stuck. And anybody here ever feel stuck? That can be it. So I'm inviting you to participate in that. And Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, is the oldest mythology that we have that's written. It was written down over 5,000 years ago on cuneiform tablets by a priestess. And this is the oldest written anything we know of in the entire world, except it was by a woman, so it doesn't get much press. So this is my quilt of Inanna, and the story of Inanna was written by Inanna, and the story is about how Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, descends into the underworld, and after 3 days is resurrected from the dead. Sound familiar? And the moon also hides for 3 days and is resurrected, so does Venus. And of course, so did Jesus. So this is a symbolic theme in all of our culture. She was also known, Inanna, you may know her as Ishtar, Astarte, and Ostara, who's the goddess from whom we get the holiday Easter, which is also about 3 days in hell and coming out. So here's the story of Inanna. And in this quilt, the two faces are Inanna and her sister Ereshkigal. Inanna is the Queen of Heaven, and her sister Ereshkigal is the Queen of Hell. And there's gates. You can just see they're little copper gates that create that circle. And what Inanna has to do is go through, descend through 7 gates to get to hell and face death. And so that's the 7 chakras. It's also the dance of the 7 veils. The dance that Salome did for Herod was a spiritual dance of the story of Inanna. The problem is, no offense to the guys here, if a woman gets naked, guys miss the spiritual content, generally, as Herod did. So, but that's what her story was, is lifting in the ancient dance. The dancer had the 7 veils covering chakra areas, and she gave them off as a sign of going through the gate. Because as Inanna had to go through each of these 7 gates, she had to give away a piece of her protection, a piece of her clothing, so that she arrives naked to face death in hell. Not a great day, probably, right? So Inanna gets down there to see her sister Ereshkigal, and there's lots more to the story. There's a book this thick. The gal who wrote it in ancient Sumeria wrote tons and tons. I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version. So Ereshkigal is not in a good mood when Inanna gets there, and so in fact she's writhing in agony. Nobody knows exactly for sure. Some of the places say she's writhing in agony from childbirth. I don't think that's it. I've been in childbirth, and there's worse things, like the death of a loved one or a child. And that's what I think she was going through. That's my personal interpretation, that Ereshkigal was going through the death of a child. So she's mad at everybody. At the world, she sees her sister Inanna, and she kills her and hangs her up on a meat hook. So, now Inanna, before Inanna left, sorry, I should have told you this part. Before Inanna left, she had told her servant Ninshibur, I'm going to hell. If I am not back in 3 days, you go get help. And get help from the ancestors. My father, my grandfather, whatever. So, Ninshibar's been sitting at the gate of hell. Inanna's not back, so she goes to check with Inanna's father, and he's like, I'm not going to help her. So this is the patriarchy, right? The masculine, that's the symbol. Doesn't make sense, not going to help. So she asks the grandfather, the father's father, and he's not interested in help. So she goes to Inanna's mother's father, the maternal grandfather. The symbolism of this is that the feminine thinks outside the box. It's not all science, it's not all details, it's not all facts. We're going to figure out something. So Ninshibar goes to see Enki. And he's like, yeah, I'll help her. And Ninshibar's like, great. And he says, I'm going to spit on this dirt and mold a couple of creatures. And Ninshibar's like, So he molds two little creatures and gives them life. And they're little tiny. Because sometimes little tiny things can save the day. And he gives them the waters of life and resurrection. And that's in here. You see the two profiles. In the center is the Holy Grail with the chalice that has the water of life. And he tells them, go appease Ereshkigal and ask her for the corpse. So they slip in under the gates unnoticed, because sometimes small things can do that. And they see Ereshkigal in agony. And in the poetry, the Sumerian poetry, she's saying, oh, my insides. And they say, oh, your insides. And she says, oh, my outsides. And they say, oh, your outsides. This goes on for a couple of pages. I won't report, but the concept is that Ereshkigal is in agony. Somebody is finally honoring her feelings. So she feels better. And she says, thank you for honoring my feelings. I'll give you whatever you want. Now, we're going to take a quick break from this story and look at another one that's similar, and that's Sir Gawain and the Loathly Lady. If you know that story or remember it, it's also sometimes called What Does Woman Really Want? And basically, I'll give you the clip version of that too. Gawain, who is like the most wonderful knight of all, handsome, charming, gentlemanly, he saves the day, because what's going to happen is King Arthur's going to be killed unless he marries the Loathly Lady. And she's pretty loathly. She's fat and short and hairy and smelly and stinky, and she farts. So, and she's old. And so the only way King Arthur's not going to be killed is if someone marries her. So Gawain, being the gentleman and wonderful knight of the Round Table that he is, he says, I'll do it. And King Arthur says, oh my God, no, you don't have to do it. Everyone says, no, yeah. He's like, I'm saving my king. I am doing this. So he marries the Loathly Lady, and on their wedding night, in their bedchamber, she says to him, there's an enchantment. And now that I'm married, the enchantment can be changed. And here's the deal. I can be beautiful half the day. And she turns into a beautiful woman, and he sees, and she's gorgeous. She says, so I can be beautiful in the daytime when all your friends see me, and I can be the hag at night, or I can be beautiful in our bed and be the hag in the daytime where everyone else sees. Well, guess what? There's only one right answer to that question, and Gawain gets it. He says, you must have power over your life. You must make that decision, not me. And with that, he breaks the spell, and she's beautiful all the time. Which is what happens with women when, and that does play out in the gender dance, is when men give women the power over their own domain, they do become beautiful all the time. So how that works in society is that we shouldn't be imposing the template of science on top of art. We shouldn't be imposing the template of facts on top of deep archetypal truth. And we shouldn't be imposing the template of maleness on top of the fullness that's God, because we're trying to judge something inside of a context that doesn't match, and that doesn't work for us, as we can see. Like, how's it been working so far, right? So, meanwhile, back in hell, Inanna's hanging on this meat hook. And Ereshkigal has just told these little creatures, I will give you something. And you know, in all the magical stories, once someone says, I will give you something, then you get to choose what it is. They don't get to say, well, I didn't mean that. She had to give it. So the two creatures say to her, we want to get Inanna off the hook. So she takes Inanna off the hook, and then, reluctantly, but she does it, and then the creatures revive her with the waters and the essence of life. And she comes back to life. And she's in the bottom of the cycle here. So, but, as often happens, as you may know in the story of Persephone, Inanna can leave, but she's got to send somebody back in her place. So, and in the story of Persephone, and she gets kidnapped and taken to hell, and she does get to escape and go back to her mother Demeter, but she has to go back half the year, and that's what the seasons are about. So anyway, so Inanna has to send somebody back. So she goes back up the 7 gates, and that's up the left-hand side there. And at each of the gates, she gets back her clothing or her piece of power that goes with that chakra, till when she gets to the top, she's fully empowered. So she has descended to the underworld, she's faced death, she's been resurrected, and she comes back in full power. And her loyal servant Minsheber is waiting at the gate for her. And they celebrate because Inanna's back. But she still has to find a replacement to go to hell. So Inanna goes home, and this was not a good time for her husband Dumuzi to be gussied up in a shark-skin suit, sitting on her throne and fellowshipping with the slave girls. So she said, I pick you. And he got chosen to go to the underworld. Serves him right. I'm not even going to say, but I know women can go out of town for 3 days, and you don't know what you're going to find when you come back. So there you go. So he's the one that got his karma pretty quick. Now there's more to that story. His sister rescues him, but so don't worry, he's not in hell forever. But he was no longer on Inanna's throne. So the question is now, what is the message that we can take? You know, the archetypes are colorful and symbolic and make great fairy tales. But what's the nugget that we can take into our regular life for this? So we want to honor the feminine side of ourselves and others. You know, the Aboriginals in Australia do this because every morning they have dream time, and they talk about their dream time as if it was an actual happening. They don't make a separation between what happened to you that night in your dreams and what you do in the daytime. So that's honoring our dream life, our divine feminine intuition with as much power as we honor the science. Give it dominion over its own qualities. Honor the arts as much as the science. Honor nature as much as technology. Honor appreciation as much as analysis. Honor the process as much as the goal. Honor compromise as much as competition. Honor grace as much as the law. And honor your deepest truth as much as facts. The heart, honoring the heart and the emotions as much as your head and your thoughts. And that's how we regain lost portions of ourselves in our individual life as well as in society. And we all become more whole and fully active in the dynamic dance of the masculine and the feminine. That's it. Thank you.
For our song, we're going to, during the orchestra as a group song, we're going to sing "Oh Happiness" on page 30. Page 30. This is written by Richard Shulman, good friend of ours.
Yes, please stand. This is a fun song. And you can move around. That's the divine goddess, the divine feminine, you know. Enjoy this song.